The dust cloud rose like a vengeful spirit on the horizon, and Clara Montgomery knew before she could count the riders that her fight for survival had just begun. She stood on the porch of her modest cabin, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron, watching as 12 mounted men approached her property in the New Mexico territory. It was April of 1878, and the spring sun beat down mercilessly on the scrubland she had worked for 3 years to cultivate into something resembling a ranch. Her husband James had staked this claim 5 years ago before the fever took him and left her a widow at 24. Now she was 27, her hands calloused from labor, her face sun-kissed despite her efforts with bonnets, and her determination forged into something harder than the iron she used to brand her small herd of cattle. The riders pulled up in a semicircle before her property line, marked by the wooden fence posts she had hammered into the ground herself last summer. At the center sat a man on a magnificent black stallion, his suit too fine for the desert, his face shadowed by an expensive hat. Samuel Blackwood. The name alone made decent people in the nearby town of Socorro either bow their heads or spit in disgust, depending on whether they owed him money. "Miss Montgomery," Blackwood called out, his voice smooth as snake oil. "I trust you received my letter." Clara stepped down from the porch, her chin lifted. "I received it, and I sent my answer. This land is not for sale." Blackwood smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "I'm afraid you misunderstand. I was not making an offer. I was providing notification. Your husband's claim papers were filed improperly. There was an error in the land office records. This property reverts to available territory, which I have now legally purchased from the territorial government." Her heart hammered against her ribs, but Clara forced her voice to remain steady. "That is a lie. James filed those papers himself. I have the documentation in my cabin, signed and sealed." "Documentation can be disputed," Blackwood said, leaning forward in his saddle. "I have friends in Santa Fe. Miss Montgomery, friends who understand that a woman alone cannot possibly maintain a proper claim on land of this quality. The spring you have here, the water rights, they are far too valuable to be wasted on a widow with 20 head of cattle and a vegetable garden. I have filed my taxes. I have improved the land as required. I have met every legal obligation." Clara's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "You cannot simply take what belongs to me because you want it." Blackwood's expression hardened. "I have the papers that say otherwise. You have 1 week to vacate this property, or I will have the territorial marshal remove you by force." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a folded document, tossing it toward her. It landed in the dust at her feet. "Consider this your official notice." He wheeled his horse around, and his men followed, leaving Clara standing alone in a cloud of dust, staring at the paper that threatened to destroy everything she had fought to preserve. She picked it up with shaking hands and read the legal language that seemed designed to confuse rather than clarify. The signature at the bottom belonged to a territorial judge she had never heard of, and the date was from 2 weeks ago. That evening, Clara rode her aging mare into Socorro, clutching the document and her own claim papers in a leather satchel. The town was small, just 2 streets of buildings arranged around a central plaza, but it served the scattered ranchers and miners who worked the surrounding territory. She went directly to the office of Henry Sutton, the closest thing the town had to a lawyer. Sutton was a thin man in his 50s with spectacles that constantly slid down his nose. He read through both sets of papers while Clara sat in the chair across from his desk, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Finally, Sutton looked up, his expression grave. "Miss Montgomery, your papers are legitimate. Your husband filed correctly, and you have maintained the claim properly. However, Blackwood's document appears to be legitimate as well, at least on its surface. Judge Cornelius Wade signed this order, and he does have jurisdiction over land disputes in this territory." "So what can I do?" Clara asked, her voice tight. Sutton removed his spectacles and rubbed his eyes. "You can file an appeal. It would go to the territorial court in Santa Fe, but I must be honest with you, that process takes months, sometimes over a year, and it is expensive. You would need to hire a lawyer there, travel back and forth for hearings, and pay various court fees. And Blackwood has influence with many of the judges. Clara felt the walls closing in. How much money are we talking about? Several $100s at minimum, possibly more than $1,000 if it drags on. She had $87 to her name. It might as well have been $1 million. There must be something else I can do. Sutton replaced his spectacles and gave her a look of sympathy mixed with resignation. You could sell to Blackwood directly. He would likely pay you something just to avoid the trouble of removing you. That land is all I have, Clara said quietly. It is where James is buried. It is where I have poured every ounce of strength I possess for 3 years. I will not simply hand it over to a thief because he has more money and connections than I do. Then I do not know what to tell you, Sutton said. Blackwood is not a man who backs down. If you refuse to leave, he will make good on his threat to have you removed. And if you resist, things could become very unpleasant. Clara rode back to her cabin as the sun set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. She had never felt more alone. Her parents were long dead. Her brother had gone to California 6 years ago, and she had not heard from him since. And James had been her whole world until the fever took him. The land was not just her home or her livelihood. It was proof that she had survived, that she was stronger than the hardships that had tried to break her. She would not give it up without a fight, even if she had no idea how to win. The next morning, Clara was mending a section of fence when she heard a horse approaching. She tensed. Reaching for the rifle she now kept propped against a fence post, but relaxed slightly when she saw it was a single rider rather than Blackwood's entire crew. The man who rode up was not someone she recognized. He sat tall in the saddle, wearing the practical clothing of a working cowboy, weather-beaten leather chaps over denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. His face was tanned and angular, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble. He looked to be in his late 20s, with eyes the color of creek water, and an easy way of sitting his horse that spoke of years in the saddle. "Morning, ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Name is Cole Brennan. I heard in town you might be needing some help." Clara studied him warily. "Who told you that?" "Man at the general store. I was asking about work, and he mentioned you had a situation with Samuel Blackwood." Cole's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "I have some experience with men like Blackwood." "I cannot pay much," Clara said bluntly, "and if you are looking for easy work, this is not it. Blackwood is powerful, and he wants my land. Standing against him could be dangerous." Cole swung down from his horse with fluid grace. "I am not looking for easy, ma'am, just honest. And I do not take kindly to land barons who steal from folks who cannot defend themselves." "I can defend myself," Clara said sharply, then sighed, "but I could use help with the ranch work, at least. If you are serious, I can offer room in the barn, 3 meals a day, and $5 a week. It is not much." "It is fair," Cole said. "I will take it." She showed him where he could stable his horse and set up his bedroll in the barn loft. Cole did not talk much, but he moved with the efficiency of someone who knew ranch work intimately. By midday, he had repaired the fence section Clara had been struggling with, checked the water pump at her spring, and identified 3 places where her perimeter fence needed reinforcement. They ate lunch on the porch, simple fare of bread, cheese, and dried beef. Clara found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. There was something solid about Cole Brennan, a quietness that suggested strength rather than weakness. But there was also a sadness in his eyes when he thought no one was watching, a heaviness that spoke of losses he did not talk about. "Why did you really take this job?" Clara asked finally. "There are ranches around here that could pay better and would not put you at odds with Samuel Blackwood." Cole was silent for a long moment, staring out at the scrubland. 5 years ago, I had a small spread in Texas near San Antonio. Nothing fancy, just enough to run a few dozen head of cattle. A man named Garrett Pierce decided he wanted the water rights to the creek that ran through my land. He had money and lawyers, same as your Blackwood. He manufactured a dispute over the property boundaries, produced documents that seemed official, and had me thrown off my own land. His jaw tightened. I tried to fight it legally, but I did not have the money or the connections. By the time I realized I could not win, my savings were gone and I was left with nothing but my horse and saddle. I am sorry, Clara said quietly. Cole looked at her directly then, and she saw the determination in his eyes. I could not save my own land, but maybe I can help you save yours. Blackwood has not taken possession yet. You are still the legal occupant. That means something. For 6 more days, Clara said bitterly. Then he sends the marshal. A lot can happen in 6 days, Cole said. Over the next 3 days, Cole worked from dawn until dark, reinforcing fences, moving Clara's small herd closer to the cabin where they could be watched, and stockpiling supplies. Clara found herself watching him more than she intended, noticing the way he moved with quiet confidence, the gentleness with which he handled the animals, and the rare smile that transformed his serious face when she said something that amused him. On the 3rd evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, Cole asked about her husband. Clara found herself talking about James, something she rarely did anymore. She told Cole about how they had met at a church social in Missouri, how James had dreamed of building something of his own in the West, and how the fever had come on so suddenly that he was gone within a week of the first symptoms. He is buried on that hill, Clara said, gesturing to a small rise about 200 yards from the cabin, where a simple wooden cross marked the grave. I read to him sometimes when things get hard. I know it is foolish, but it makes me feel less alone. It is not foolish, Cole said softly. We hold on to the people we have lost in whatever ways we can. You have lost someone too, Clara said. It was not a question. Cole nodded slowly. Her name was Sarah. We were engaged to be married when Pierce took my land. I thought we would work through it together, start over somewhere else, but her father convinced her that I was a failure, that I could not provide for her. She broke off the engagement a month later. He looked out at the darkening sky. I do not blame her. Her father was probably right. He was not, Clara said firmly. Starting over after losing everything does not make you a failure. It makes you strong. Cole turned to look at her, and something passed between them in the fading light, an understanding that went beyond words. They were both survivors, both fighters who had refused to let their losses destroy them. And in that moment, Clara realized that Cole Brennan had become more than just a hired hand. He had become someone she trusted, someone she relied on, and someone whose presence made the cabin feel less empty. The moment was interrupted by the sound of approaching horses. Cole was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the pistol at his hip. Clara grabbed her rifle from inside the door, her heart pounding, but it was not Blackwood. Instead, 3 men rode up, cowboys by the look of them, their faces weary and their clothes dusty from travel. The man in front raised his hands to show they were empty. We are not looking for trouble, he called out. Name is Jack Morrison. These are my partners, Pete and Sanchez. We heard in town that you were standing up to Samuel Blackwood. Clara exchanged a glance with Cole, who had not relaxed his stance. What business is that of yours? She asked. Jack dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. He was a stocky man in his 40s, with a weathered face and honest eyes. Blackwood ran us off a piece of land about 50 miles south of here 2 years ago. Used the same tactics, fake papers and legal tricks. We did not have the resources to fight him, so we lost everything we had worked for. We have been drifting ever since, taking jobs where we can find them. He looked at Clara with something like hope in his expression. If you are willing to stand against him, we want to help. No pay necessary, we just want to see that snake get what is coming to him. Cole stepped forward. Why should we trust you? How do we know Blackwood did not send you? Sanchez, a lean man with a thick mustache, spat in the dust. Because we would rather die than work for that devil. He took everything from us. Jack's wife left him because of it. Pete lost his chance to bring his mother out from Missouri. And me? I had to give up on buying a small place to retire to. His eyes were hard. If Blackwood sent us, it would be to put a bullet in his back, not to help him. Clara made a decision. If you are sincere, then yes, we can use help. But understand, This might not end well. Blackwood has the law on his side, or at least the appearance of it. We are trying to hold ground until we can figure out a way to prove his documents are fraudulent. That is more of a fight than we got to make, Pete said. He was younger than the other two, perhaps 25, with sandy hair and a quick smile despite the hardship he had endured. We are in. That night, the six of them sat around the table in Clara's cabin, which suddenly felt crowded, but in a good way. They planned and discussed options, examining Blackwood's document from every angle. It was Sanchez who noticed the detail that gave them their first real hope. "Look at this date," he said, pointing to the notation in the corner of the legal document. March 15th. But the territorial office in Santa Fe was closed the entire week of March 10th through March 17th. I know because I was there trying to file a claim on some mining rights. There was a fire in the building next door, and they had to evacuate while they checked the structural damage. Cole leaned forward intently. So this document could not have been processed on the date it claims? Not legally, Sanchez confirmed, which means someone backdated it, probably to make it appear that Blackwood filed before Miss Montgomery's rights were fully established. "We need to prove that," Clara said, excitement rising in her chest for the first time since this nightmare began. "We need documentation from the territorial office confirming those dates." "I will ride to Santa Fe," Cole said immediately. "It is a 3-day ride. Hard. I can be back before the week is up." "Not alone, you will not," Jack said. "Blackwood might have men watching the roads. Pete and I will go with you. Sanchez can stay here with Miss Montgomery, help keep watch." Clara wanted to protest Cole leaving, surprised by how strongly she felt about it, but she knew it made sense. "Be careful," she said, looking directly at Cole. "Blackwood plays dirty." Cole met her eyes, and she saw the determination there. "I will be back in time, I promise." He left before dawn the next morning, riding hard toward Santa Fe with Jack and Pete flanking him. Clara watched until they disappeared into the early morning darkness, feeling a knot of worry in her stomach that had nothing to do with her land and everything to do with the man riding away. The next 2 days passed with agonizing slowness. Clara and Sanchez maintained the ranch routines, but the tension was a constant presence. Sanchez proved to be good company, telling stories of his childhood in Mexico and his years working cattle drives up from Texas. He was married, he told her, but his wife had died in childbirth 10 years ago along with their baby daughter. "I am sorry," Clara said, as they sat watching the sunset from the porch on the second evening. "It seems everyone around here has lost someone." "It is the way of things out here," Sanchez said philosophically. "The West is beautiful, but she is hard. She takes, and we have to fight for every scrap of happiness we can find." He glanced at her with a knowing smile. "But sometimes, if we are lucky, we find something worth fighting for." "I am fighting for my land," Clara said. "Are you?" Sanchez asked gently. "Or are you maybe fighting for what the land represents? A life? A future? Maybe a future with someone who understands what you have been through?" Clara felt her cheeks warm. "I do not know what you mean." Sanchez chuckled. "I may be old and worn out, but I am not blind. The way you look at Cole, the way he looks at you when you're not watching, it is the way my wife and I used to look at each other. Like you have found something precious that you did not expect." Clara did not trust herself to respond. She had been trying not to think about the fact that every moment without Cole nearby felt incomplete, or that she had started imagining what it might be like if he stayed after this was over, if he became more than just a hired hand. It was too soon, too complicated, and too uncertain. But her heart did not seem to care about any of that. On the evening of the 5th day, Cole, Jack, and Pete thundered back into the yard, their horses lathered and exhausted. Cole dismounted and strode toward Clara, pulling a rolled document from his saddlebag, his face alight with triumph. "We got it," he said, breathless. Official statement from the Territorial Land Office, signed by the director himself. The office was closed for 8 days in March, and no documents were processed during that time. Blackwood's papers are fraudulent. Clara took the document with shaking hands, hardly daring to believe it. There it was, in official language, proof that Samuel Blackwood had lied. "This means I can fight him. This means I have a chance." "More than a chance," Cole said. "With this, we can get the territorial marshal to reject his claim entirely. He has no legal standing." But Jack's expression was troubled. "There is more. We heard in Santa Fe that Blackwood knows something is up. He has moved up his timeline. He is coming tomorrow morning with the marshal and a full crew. He plans to evict you by force and take immediate possession." The triumph drained from Clara's face. "Tomorrow? But we need time to get this to the right officials to file the proper challenges." "The marshal is already on Blackwood's payroll," Pete said grimly. "We heard talk in Santa Fe. He is not going to listen to documents that contradict what Blackwood has told him. He is just here to make the eviction look legal." "Then we make our stand here," Cole said firmly. "We show him the proof, and we refuse to let Blackwood take possession. We force the issue into the open where witnesses can see what is happening." "There are only 5 of us," Sanchez pointed out. "Blackwood will have a dozen men or more." "We are not going to fight them," Cole said. "We are just going to stand our ground and make sure everyone knows that what Blackwood is doing is theft, pure and simple. If we can create enough of a scene, enough doubt, we can force the territorial officials to take a real look at the situation." Clara looked at the 4 men who had chosen to stand with her, risking their own safety for her cause. "I cannot ask you to do this. If things turn violent, you could be arrested or worse." Cole stepped closer to her, and without thinking, he took her hand. The touch sent warmth through her entire body. "You are not asking. We are choosing. I am choosing." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I will not stand by and watch another good person lose everything to a man like Blackwood. And I will not let him take this land from you." The moment stretched between them, charged with all the unspoken feelings that had been building over the past week. Clara realized that somewhere between his arrival and this moment, Cole Brennan had become essential to her, not just as an ally, but as something much more profound. "All right," she said softly, still holding his hand. "We make our stand." They spent the night preparing, not for battle, but for resistance. Cole positioned everyone strategically around the property, ensuring they would be visible but not threatening. The goal was to demonstrate that Clara was not alone, that taking her land would not be a simple matter of intimidation. As the sun rose on the 6th day, painting the desert gold and crimson, Clara stood on her porch with Cole at her side. Jack, Pete, and Sanchez were positioned at intervals along the fence line, their rifles held casually but visibly. The message was clear without being overtly aggressive. They did not have to wait long. The dust cloud appeared just after 7 in the morning, larger than before. Blackwood rode at the head of a group of at least 15 men, with a portly man wearing a marshal's badge riding beside him. They pulled up at the property line, and Blackwood's expression darkened when he saw Clara was not alone. The marshal rode forward, his face already set in an expression of officiousness covering discomfort. "Miss Montgomery, I am Marshal Cyrus Holt. I have here a legal order granting possession of this property to Mr. Samuel Blackwood, effective immediately. You are required to vacate the premises within the hour." Clara stepped down from the porch, Cole moving with her like a shadow. "Marshal Holt, I have evidence that Mr. Blackwood's documents are fraudulent. His claim papers are dated on a day when the Territorial Land Office was closed and could not have processed any filings." She held up the statement Cole had obtained in Santa Fe. Holt took it reluctantly and read through it, his frown deepening. He glanced back at Blackwood, who had gone very still in his saddle. "This is a serious allegation," Holt said slowly. "Mr. Blackwood, do you have an explanation for this discrepancy?" Blackwood's face had turned red. "There must be some clerical error. The land office is notoriously disorganized. The date on my documents may not reflect the exact date they were filed, but the claim itself is legitimate. This woman is grasping at straws to avoid the inevitable." "The inevitability of you stealing my land, you mean," Clara said, her voice ringing across the yard. "Everyone here is a witness to what is happening. Samuel Blackwood is using fraudulent documents and a corrupt legal process to seize property that legally belongs to me. I have witnesses, I have proof, and I will not be moved. Cole stepped forward, positioning himself slightly in front of Clara. His hand rested on the butt of his pistol, not drawing but making his presence clear. "This land belongs to her," he said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "She filed legally. She has improved the property according to territorial law. She has met every requirement of her claim. If you try to remove her based on fake documents, you are not enforcing the law, Marshal. You are breaking it." The Marshal looked deeply uncomfortable now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the morning coolness. The other men in Blackwood's crew were shifting uneasily, clearly not having signed up for a situation where the legality was being so publicly questioned. "I have a court order," Holt said, but his voice lacked conviction. "From a judge who signed off on fraudulent documents," Jack called out from his position. "That does not make it legal, Marshal. That makes it conspiracy to commit theft." Blackwood's control snapped. "I am done with this charade, Marshal. Remove these squatters immediately, or I will do it myself." "That would be a mistake," Cole said quietly, but his voice carried steel, "because every man here is willing to testify in court about what is really happening. And if you try to take this land by force, you will have to explain why you needed violence to claim property that you say is legally yours." The standoff stretched, tension thick in the air. Blackwood's men looked at each other uncertainly. Several of them were clearly hired guns, but others looked like regular ranch hands who had not expected to be part of something that smelled this rotten. Finally, one of Blackwood's men, a grizzled cowboy with gray in his beard, spat tobacco juice and turned his horse. "I signed on for ranch work, not for stealing from widows. I am done." He rode away without looking back. Two more men followed, then a fourth. Blackwood's crew was dissolving before his eyes, and the fury on his face was murderous. But he was also a pragmatist. He could see that forcing the issue now would create witnesses and attention he did not want. "This is not over," Blackwood snarled at Clara. "I will have this land one way or another." "Then you will have to do it legally," Clara said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. "And we both know your claim will not survive real scrutiny." Blackwood wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his remaining men following. The Marshal sat for a moment longer, looking miserable, then tipped his hat awkwardly to Clara. "I will report this situation to the territorial office, ma'am. They will have to sort out which claim is legitimate." He rode after Blackwood at a more dignified pace, but Clara could see the relief in his posture at being able to leave. As the dust settled, the silence was profound. Then Jack let out a whoop of triumph, and suddenly everyone was laughing with the release of tension. Clara felt her knees go weak, and Cole's arm came around her shoulders, steadying her. "You did it," he said softly, his face close to hers. "You stood your ground." And he blinked first. Clara turned to look up at him, acutely aware of his closeness, of the strength of his arms supporting her, of the way his eyes held admiration and something deeper. "We did it," she corrected. "I could not have done this without you. Without all of you." The next weeks were a flurry of activity. With the evidence of fraud, Clara filed formal challenges to Blackwood's claim through Henry Sutton. The lawyer, emboldened by the documentation and the public nature of the confrontation, took the case to the territorial governor's office. An investigation was launched into Judge Wade's involvement, and rumors began circulating that Blackwood had bribed multiple officials. The scandal grew beyond Clara's small situation. Other people who had lost land to Blackwood's tactics came forward with their own stories. What had been a private dispute became a territorial matter, with newspapers in Santa Fe and Albuquerque running stories about land fraud and corruption. Through it all, Cole remained at Clara's side. Jack, Pete, and Sanchez stayed as well, helping to run the ranch and serving as witnesses in the various hearings and depositions that followed. Clara's small operation became a bustling hub of activity, and she found herself cooking for 5 men every evening, listening to their stories and laughter filling her cabin. But it was Cole's presence that meant the most. He worked beside her from dawn to dusk, and in the evenings they would sit on the porch together talking about everything and nothing. Clara learned about his childhood in Kentucky, the family he had left behind when he came west, his dreams of having land again someday. She shared her own memories of growing up in Missouri, her parents' deaths from cholera, and her deep love for the land that James had given her. One evening in early June, 2 months after the confrontation with Blackwood, they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The territorial court had ruled in Clara's favor the week before, declaring Blackwood's documents fraudulent and confirming her sole ownership of the property. Judge Wade had been removed from the bench, and Blackwood himself was facing criminal charges. "It is finally over," Clara said softly. "I can hardly believe it." "You did it," Cole said, pride evident in his voice. "You fought and you won." Clara turned to look at him, her heart full of everything she had been holding back for weeks. "Cole, I need to tell you something." He turned to face her, his eyes searching hers. "What is it?" "When this started, when you first showed up, I was alone and terrified. I thought I was going to lose everything I had worked for, everything that connected me to James. But these past 2 months, you have given me so much more than help with the ranch. You have given me hope. You have reminded me that my life is not over just because James is gone." She took a shaky breath. "I know we have not known each other long, and maybe this is too fast, but I need you to know that I have fallen in love with you." Cole's eyes widened, and for a moment Clara feared she had made a terrible mistake. Then his face transformed with a smile that was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Clara, I have been in love with you since the day you stood up to Blackwood's entire crew with nothing but a rifle and your courage. I did not say anything because I did not know if you were ready, if you would want someone like me who has lost everything before." "You have not lost everything," Clara said, reaching for his hand. "You have yourself, your strength, your honor, your kindness. Those are things that can never be taken away, and if you want it, you have me." Cole pulled her into his arms, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, then deeper as months of suppressed longing poured out between them. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless, and Clara felt tears on her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "Marry me," Cole said, his forehead resting against hers. "Let me spend the rest of my life standing guard over you and this land and whatever we build together." "Yes," Clara whispered. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married in September, in the small church in Socorro, with half the town in attendance. The story of Clara's fight against Blackwood had spread throughout the territory, and she had become something of a local hero. People who had never met her came to wish her well and to see the woman who had stood up to one of the most powerful men in New Mexico. Jack, Pete, and Sanchez stood up for Cole, having become his closest friends through the ordeal. Henry Sutton gave Clara away, and in the front pew sat several women who had traveled from distant ranches, women who had heard Clara's story and found inspiration in it to fight their own battles. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When Cole said his vows, promising to stand by Clara through whatever hardships came, his voice was thick with emotion. And when Clara promised to build a life with him, to trust in their future together, she meant every word with her entire heart. The celebration afterward was boisterous, with music and dancing in the town plaza. Clara danced with Cole under the stars, feeling lighter and happier than she had in years. This was not the future she had imagined when James died, but it was a good future, perhaps even a better one than she had dared to dream. Jack, Pete, and Sanchez stayed on as permanent hands, and Clara's small ranch began to grow into something more substantial. With 4 experienced cowboys working the land, they expanded the herd, improved the irrigation from the spring, and even planted a small orchard. The property that Blackwood had coveted for its water became a thriving operation under their combined efforts. A year after the wedding, Clara gave birth to a son they named James Cole Montgomery Brennan, honoring both the husband she had lost and the husband she had found. Cole was present at the birth, holding Clara's hand through the long labor, and when he held his son for the first time, Clara saw tears streaming down his face. "I never thought I would have this," Cole said, his voice breaking. "A family, a home, a future worth protecting." "We built it together," Clara said, exhausted but radiant. "And we will protect it together." Life settled into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and exciting. The ranch prospered, and Cole proved to have a gift for breeding and training horses that brought in additional income. Jack married a widow from Socorro, a practical woman named Martha who fit seamlessly into their extended ranch family. Pete and Sanchez remained bachelors but seemed content with their roles as uncles to young James and valued members of the household. 2 years after James Cole was born, Clara gave birth to twin daughters, Mary and Sarah, named for Cole's mother and his lost fiancée. Cole had hesitated at the suggestion of Sarah, but Clara insisted. "She was part of your story," Clara said, holding one of the squirming infants, "and your story is part of our story now. We do not erase the past. We honor it and build something better from it." The twins were followed 3 years later by another son, Robert, and then 2 years after that by a daughter named Elizabeth. The cabin that had once felt empty with just Clara rattling around in it now overflowed with life and noise and love. Blackwood never fully recovered from the scandal. He lost much of his land holdings as other fraudulent claims were investigated and overturned. Eventually, he left the territory entirely, relocating to California where his reputation had not yet preceded him. The territorial reforms that followed the scandal made it harder for powerful men to manipulate the land claim system, and Clara took pride in knowing that her fight had made things better for others. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole and Clara stood on the porch of their expanded ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. James Cole was 9 now, already showing signs of being a natural horseman like his father. The twins, at 8, were inseparable and into everything. Robert and Elizabeth toddled after their older siblings, trying to keep up. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked, leaning into Cole's embrace. "Taking a chance on a stubborn widow with a land dispute and no money?" Cole laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Not for a single second. You gave me everything I thought I had lost. Purpose, a home, a family. You gave me back my future." "We gave each other our futures," Clara corrected. She turned to look up at him, seeing the silver threading through his hair now, the lines around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, the deeper lines from years of laughter. "I love you, Cole Brennan. I love the man you were when you first rode into my yard. And I love even more the man you have become." Cole kissed her softly, a kiss that held 10 years of shared joys and struggles, of passion and partnership. "I love you, Clara Brennan. When I stood guard that day and told Blackwood this land belonged to you, I did not know that I was really fighting for my own future, for our future." In the distance, Jack and Pete were working with the horses in the corral while Martha hung laundry and Sanchez taught James Cole how to rope a fence post. The ranch was a picture of prosperity and contentment, a testament to what could be built when good people refused to back down from injustice. As the sun set over the New Mexico desert, painting the sky in the brilliant colors Clara never tired of, she felt complete. The journey from terrified widow to thriving ranch owner had been harrowing, but every hardship had been worth it. She had her land, the land James had claimed, and she had fought to keep. But more than that, she had Cole and their children, and a life richer than any she could have imagined. The land still belonged to her, but her heart belonged to the cowboy who had stood guard when she needed him most, and who had stayed to build a life that neither of them could have built alone. Together they had created something that would last for generations, a legacy of courage, love, and the unshakable belief that justice was worth fighting for. Years continued to roll by like tumbleweeds across the prairie. James Cole grew into a young man of 18, as steady and reliable as his father, with his mother's determination burning in his eyes. He took over more and more of the ranch's daily operations, and Clara and Cole often joked that they were in danger of being put out to pasture themselves. The twins, Mary and Sarah, at 17, had become forces of nature in their own right. Mary had her mother's head for business and kept the ranch's books with meticulous precision, while Sarah had inherited her father's way with horses and could gentle the wildest Mustang. Robert, at 14, was quiet and thoughtful, always with his nose in a book when he was not working, dreaming of becoming a lawyer to fight injustices like the one his mother had faced. And Elizabeth, at 12, was the ranch's ray of sunshine, always singing, always finding joy in the smallest things. Jack and Martha had 3 children of their own now, and Pete had finally married a school teacher from Socorro. Even old Sanchez, who everyone thought would remain a bachelor forever, had found companionship with a widow who ran the boarding house in town. The ranch had become the center of a sprawling, interconnected family. On a warm evening in the spring of 1896, nearly 18 years after that fateful confrontation with Blackwood, the entire extended family gathered for a celebration. James Cole had just returned from Santa Fe, where he had successfully negotiated a contract to supply horses to the Army, a deal that would secure the ranch's prosperity for years to come. As Clara looked around at the long table set up under the cottonwood trees, laden with food and surrounded by the faces of everyone she loved, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This was what she and Cole had built together. Not just a successful ranch, but a community, a family that extended far beyond blood. Cole appeared at her elbow, sliding an arm around her waist. At 52, he was still strong and capable, though his hair was now more silver than brown. "What are you thinking about, Ish?" he asked softly. "I am thinking about how lucky I am," Clara said. At 55, feeling the weight of years, but also the wisdom that came with them. "That day you rode up to my cabin, I thought I was hiring a ranch hand. I had no idea I was really finding my future." "I knew," Cole said with a smile, "maybe not right at that moment, but soon after. You were so fierce, so determined not to let Blackwood win. I saw the woman you were underneath the fear, and I fell in love with that woman. I still am in love with that woman." Clara turned in his embrace, reaching up to touch his weathered face. "We have had a good life, you and I." "The best life," Cole agreed, "and it is not over yet. We still have grandchildren to spoil, and I have a feeling Robert is going to make us proud when he opens that law office he's always talking about." "And Elizabeth will probably run off and join a traveling show," Clara said with a laugh. "That girl has stars in her eyes." "She comes by it honestly," Cole said. Her mother had the courage to stand up to an army when everyone told her it was hopeless. That kind of spirit runs in the family. As the evening progressed and the family gathered around the table sharing food and stories and laughter, Clara stood to make a toast. Everyone quieted, looking at her expectantly. 18 years ago, Clara began, her voice carrying across the gathering, I stood on the porch of a tiny cabin watching dust clouds approach and knowing my entire world was about to crumble. I was alone, afraid, and certain I was going to lose everything. But I did not lose. I won. And I won not just because I was stubborn, though God knows I was that, but because people I barely knew chose to stand with me. Cole, Jack, Pete, Sanchez, you took a chance on a lost cause and turned it into a victory. She raised her glass higher. But more than that, you gave me a family. Cole, you gave me a love I thought I would never find again. You gave me children and grandchildren and a future so bright it sometimes hurts to look at. This ranch, this family, this life we have built together, it is the greatest victory of all. So I want to toast to standing your ground when everything tells you to give up, to the people who stand with you when you are at your lowest, and most of all, to love that comes when you least expect it and transforms everything it touches. To family, Cole added, standing beside her, his own glass raised. To family, The gathered crowd echoed, their voices rising into the twilight. Later that night, after the guests had departed and the children had gone to bed, Clara and Cole walked hand in hand to the small hill where James was buried. They did this sometimes, usually on significant occasions, to share their joys with the man who had made their initial journey west possible. "I hope you do not mind," Clara said softly, addressing the grave, as she had so many times before. "I hope you know that I never forgot you, that I still honor what we had. But I also hope you understand that I found love again, that I found happiness. I think you would have liked Cole. I think you would have wanted this for me." Cole squeezed her hand gently. He had never felt threatened by Clara's continuing connection to her first husband, understanding that the heart had room for more than one love, that honoring the past did not diminish the present. As they stood in the cooling night air, looking out over the ranch that sprawled below them, Clara reflected on the strange paths life took. If Blackwood had never tried to steal her land, Cole never would have come. If she had not been forced to fight, she never would have discovered the depth of her own strength. The worst moment of her life had led directly to the best years of her life. "What do you think happens now?" Clara asked as they walked back toward the house, where lamplight glowed warmly in the windows. "The 20th century is only 4 years away. The world is changing so fast. Automobiles, electricity, telephones. What will become of places like this, of the way we live?" "The world will change," Cole said thoughtfully. "But some things remain constant. People will always need food, which means they will always need ranches. Families will always need homes. Love will always matter. We have built something here that can adapt and survive, just like we adapted and survived." "You're probably right," Clara said, then smiled. "You usually are, though I do not tell you that often enough." Cole laughed. "You tell me in other ways. Every day we have together, every smile, every moment of this life we share, that tells me everything I need to know." They reached the porch, and Clara paused before going inside, looking back at the land one more time. Somewhere out there, the spring still flowed with clear, cold water. The cattle grazed peacefully, the horses dozed in their corral. Everything was as it should be, safe and secure, and theirs. "This land belongs to her," Clara said softly, repeating the words Cole had spoken so long ago. "But it also belongs to us now, to our children and grandchildren, to everyone who fought for it and everyone who will inherit it." "That is the way it should be," Cole said, opening the door for her. "Land is not just about ownership. It is about legacy, about building something that lasts beyond your own life. We have done that, Clara. Together we have built something that will endure." Inside, the house was quiet, but full of the peaceful presence of a happy home. Clara and Cole climbed the stairs to their bedroom, moving with the easy synchronization of two people who had shared their lives for nearly 2 decades. As Clara prepared for bed, she caught Cole watching her with that look he still got sometimes, the one that said he could not quite believe his good fortune. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Just loving you," Cole said simply. "Just thinking about how every choice I made, every wrong turn, every loss, it all led me here, to you, to this. I would not change a single thing because it all brought me home." Clara crossed to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You are my home," she said. "Not this house, not this land, you. Wherever you are, that is where I belong." They kissed, a long, slow kiss that held all the passion of new love and all the depth of old love combined. When they finally climbed into bed, Clara nestled against Cole's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling safe and cherished and complete. As she drifted toward sleep, Clara's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. Life had tested her, pushed her to her limits, and then rewarded her beyond measure. She had fought for her land and won. She had opened her heart again and found a love that exceeded anything she had imagined. She had built a family and a legacy that would continue long after she was gone. The land baron had tried to seize her claim. A cowboy had stood guard and said those words that changed everything. And from that moment of crisis and courage had grown a love story that would be told around dinner tables and campfires for generations to come. Clara fell asleep smiling, held secure in the arms of the man who had stood guard over her heart and helped her build a future worth fighting for. Outside, the New Mexico stars blazed in the endless sky, watching over the ranch, the family, and the love that had transformed them all. The West was still wild in many ways, still hard and unforgiving, but it was also beautiful and full of possibility for those brave enough to stand their ground and fight for what mattered. And Clara Montgomery Brennan had done exactly that, creating a legacy of courage, love, and unshakable determination that would inspire her descendants for 100 years to come. The land belonged to her, but more importantly, she belonged to it, and to the life she had built with the cowboy who had stood guard when she needed him most and stayed to build forever at her side.